cash, homie.
Would you please break a damn story?
He took it out.
Oh, for you.
It's a Thursday PFTOT. Audio file ends up at the PFT PM podcast. Chris Sims, Mike Florio. Things that we either didn't get to or we'd like to talk about some more. Chris, and I think we hit the looming expansion of the NFL playoffs from 12 to 14 teams in every way we possibly could, with the exception of one angle that I neglected to mention and didn't organically come up, but it's been hiding in plain sight now that we know that this is something that is going to be part of the new CBA, and it's the reality. The players don't seem to have a problem with it.
No, they don't.
We've heard plenty of times, hey, 17 games, oh, we don't want 17 games. I haven't heard boo about we don't want 14 playoff teams instead of 12. And you'd think that something would have come up if the players had an issue with it, so I can only surmise that they're fine with this.
Yeah, no, it does seem that way, and again, I would like to keep things the way they are. I can deal with this seventh, team in each conference. I don't love it, but I can deal with it. And, the formula, okay. Now, I think the players can get behind this because, it is the playoffs. I think that's the big thing. It gives, two teams an extra chance, an extra crack at the Super Bowl and proving your legacy. And, yes, it's a little different than the 17th game of the season where, of course, everybody has to play that. I think, the players can digest this a little bit more because it's an extra playoff check. It's probably more money in the pot altogether all around, and it's a chance to improve your legacy as a player because then you get into the playoffs, and that's what people remember for you, those moments. So I think that's probably more than likely the reason the players can get behind it. But you're right. We've heard nothing, no pushback, nothing about this really until yesterday.
And one of the realities is of having only two teams get a bye, the number one seed in each conference, you're going to have 12 teams that potentially will play 21 total games. Not all 12, but if the Super Bowl participant is anyone but the one seed, that team will have played 21 games, Chris.
Yeah, that's where yeah. Sorry.
And soon to be 22, right?
Yes.
And here's the reality. If the next step is what we believe, 17 goes to 18 and 14 goes to 16, you will have every year two teams play 22 total games. It is amazing. When you think about the standard college schedule used to be 11.
Right.
Now, I know it's more than that now, but it used to be 11. Now you're looking at 22 total games. Two teams, obviously not all of them, but every year there'll be two teams that play 22.
It's asking a lot. It is. I was going to say this during the show today, but we had so many different angles and things to talk about. I never got to it, but yeah, that's a dramatic jump. That's a lot of football to be playing. And again, this is going to take years of people's careers away. It's going to do that. Because it's just more opportunity to get hurt too and bang up your body and do all that. And, to your point with college football and everything, they were talking a lot of the last 2 years about, these teams have played 15 games. Never in the history of college football they played 15. Now you're going to up that ante, by 50%. I mean, that to me is just that's crazy, basically. It really is. 22 games. Wow. And the most physical, brutal sport there is right now. That is rough. And, that's a little scary. And, again, it just goes back to a little bit of we talk about player safety, but, and it's getting safer and we're making things go in the right direction. But, these kind of conversations it always seems to go back about, hey, okay, we're trying to make it safer, but we just want more money. That's all there is to it. And that's where it seems like it's going.
More money and more things for people to gamble on, which will generate more money as well. They've wanted to expand the regular season for years now, and I think the advent of legalized gambling state by state, and really, look, it's going to be 2021, 2022, or 2023 when the regular season expands. The playoff expansion would begin right away. But as more and more states go online with legalized gambling, that's when we see just the opportunity for the NFL to, Roger Goodell wants to get to $25 billion. This is a way to get to $25 billion. This is a way to get to $50 billion in time, especially when you throw international growth of the league on top of it. And look, here's the reality. I feel like a deal is going to get done soon. And if a deal doesn't get done by the time the NFL sits down with the networks to negotiate new TV contracts. And I don't know whether or not the NFL will do it without a new CBA in place. I know the NFL wants to do it, Chris, with labor peace. But let's assume they don't get a deal done now and that it all gets tabled until next year when the CBA expires and we get into 2021. There are three general options that we need to be thinking of because there's one specific strategy that I believe the NFL Players Association is bracing for. Now, option one is what happened in 2011. Players get locked out, right? Negotiations continue, players are locked out, and then when the season rolls around and they're looking at missing game checks, they say uncle, and they get a deal done and they come back. The other option is for the players to go on strike at some point. And we know from 1987, something your dad lived through, the strike doesn't work because the players eventually are going to cave, they're going to cry uncle, they're going to come back. The other option is this. Negotiate to the point of impasse, contract expires, the league can then implement the last best offer that they made to the players before the impasse was reached. You implement the rules, and the players have two choices. Deal with those rules that have been unilaterally implemented or go on strike. Well, they're not going to go on strike. And the concern is that the rules that get implemented come 2021 very well may be 18 regular season games, right? And a lower percentage than what, whatever the best offer is at the time the impasse happens is what gets implemented. And the best offer in August of 2021 may not be as good as the best offer now, precisely because of the impact on the NFL of not doing the new TV deals now when they can strike while the iron's hot. The iron may not be as hot if they do the TV deals next year. So keep that in mind. I think the union is bracing for this possibility of a lesser offer than what's currently on the table being forced down their throats next year. Yeah. And they're going to be dared to strike, and they're not going to strike.
That's interesting. Again, this is where you're the man. You're unbelievable with these kind of things, and I can't even digest everything you just said right there. But yes, that would scare me as a player. You're right. And of course, as you've mentioned and we've talked about before, yeah, of course the players are in a, less than advantageous area here. First off, they're football players. And the other side of the table, more times than not, are great businessmen. And the other side of the table have lots of liquid cash to fall on if there is a strike, so they never panic. The other side of the table, only a few guys on every team have enough liquid cash to kind of continue to survive that way. The middle class, the lower class of the NFL, yeah, a year off from missing pay when you're a young guy and you're just starting to accumulate some money and wealth in your life, that's a huge blow to you. And you only have so many years to play football, and that's where players are truly at a disadvantage here, especially compared to the other sports too, especially with no guaranteed contracts or anything like that. And you're right, the players are always gonna fold at some point or another.
And let me tell you something. And this has just kind of occurred to me as you said what you said, and this is why it's good to have a chance to talk this stuff through without having to worry about going to break or anything else. The entire professional sports model, specifically as it relates to football, just doesn't fit with the standard labor management relationship situation, because a strike in a normal business puts a ton of pressure on that business because it's not producing at that point. They can go out and hire scabs. It's a hell of a lot harder to hire scabs when you're a steel making operation or, a more typical company that would have a strike. And, you've got all these owners. Number one, they've got their money. Number two, plenty of them are making money off of other business interests anyway. They can easily shut the NFL down for a year and never feel the pain. But for the players, you've got big money that's gone, right? Like if it's a lower paying job, I think in a weird sort of way, it's easier to pay your bills because you're living a more restricted lifestyle anyway.
Right.
If you're living a lavish lifestyle and all of a sudden you've got no money, what the hell do you do?
Yeah, right.
So I really think this, Chris, and I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole on this. I think the better model for the NFL Players Association long term is to disband and to treat the NFL like 32 businesses, to hold the NFL accountable under the antitrust rules, because the only reason the NFL is allowed to have 32 businesses come together and set all these rules, draft, free agency, minimum salaries, all of that, is because they are collectively negotiating with players. If you get rid of that and you force these 32 teams to truly compete as 32 businesses, and anything they do collectively becomes an antitrust violation, I don't know how it plays out, but I have a feeling it may play out better for the players under that scenario where they have the hammer of antitrust litigation anytime those 32 businesses try to come together and make collective rules. And I think at some point, as this gets bigger and bigger, at some point the players need to have that philosophical conversation as to whether or not they are better off not being unionized, but being in an association that monitors potential antitrust activity, files lawsuits whenever it happens, and treats 32 separate teams like the 32 separate businesses they are.
That's interesting. I mean, that's an interesting take. I mean, I don't know what I'd have to think about that more. I got to think about what the negatives would be for the players if they do that. But you're right. It certainly seems like it would make it harder on owners in these type of situations, because now the onus is on them more instead of just the NFL and the Shield all together helping each other out that way. So. That'd be interesting, Mike. I don't know if their players are quite there yet, but that would be an interesting angle if that came up here in the next few years.
And here's what the biggest negative would be. If it was 32 independent businesses that were all on, their own equal footing to do whatever they wanted to do. Look at what the XFL is doing. Look at how little they're paying some of these guys, because the supply of football players who can at least pass the eyeball test, right? They may not be the greatest players in the world, but you put a Chicago Bears uniform on a guy who played at the college level, we're going to watch it. It's the Chicago Bears. He plays for the Bears. But maybe he's going to be making peanuts in comparison to what he's making under the protection of a union. I just feel like there are limitations, because ultimately the players aren't going to use that hammer that most unionized workforces, and it's still a difficult thing for any unionized workforce to go on strike. I just feel like the dynamics and the realities for professional football make it hard. You got a limited career.
Yes.
You've got big salaries.
Right.
It's a lot to sacrifice your football games. You want to play and you want to get paid. And when push comes to shove, the players are typically going to cave in and do what the owners want them to do. All right. Coming up in 3 weeks and 6 days, the start of free agency. Somebody raised a great point with me yesterday. I talked about this earlier on radio. We didn't get to it during the show. Tom Brady wants to do this vanity tour, or not even vanity tour. He wants to do a vanity sit where they all come to him. All the interested comes to him, right? Well, he can't start meeting with teams until March 18th. So, Chris, consider this. It's one thing to express interest in Tom Brady now when you have other alternatives out there if you don't get Tom Brady. Hey, I'm the Buccaneers. I want Tom Brady. I don't get Tom Brady. Well, I'll try to get Phillip Rivers, or I'll try to trade for Andy Dalton, or I'll keep Jameis Winston. But what if Tom Brady expects these teams to basically put their offseason plans on hold as of March 18. And you got to get in line to go kiss the ring and or the ass of Tom Brady. And you can't sign your plan B until you know that you're not getting Tom Brady. What teams can really afford to wait from March 18 until March 22nd, March 23rd, March 25th to wait for Tom Brady to make a decision while all their other alternatives are being snatched up by other teams?
So I mean, you're right. It's a great question. The first thing is, what teams, like, all right, you and me, let's just brainstorm this right now. What teams do we realistically think that are truly interested in Tom Brady right now, right? Like, let's just say, here's the four that jump to me just right off the bat. The Raiders, the Chargers, the Titans. Okay, I'll throw the Bucs in there for 4 teams that might be interested, right? I don't know if I see anybody else that I can even, try to realistically say they would be in the conversation. I don't know. You tell me.
What about the Colts?
Maybe the Colts. I know. I think about you there. You're right. That might be another team. You're right. We should probably throw on the list there. The Colts would probably
What about the Dolphins?
I mean, I think realistically they could do it. I don't know. I just don't see that happening. And Tom Brady's not going to go to a team that's in total rebuild mode. So that's where I just throw that. I just want to say no, even though I know that it can happen. I just don't see it happening at this state of the franchise and where Brady is in his career. But I think
let's put him on the list for these purposes.
Fine.
Let's put him on the
Let's
list. We've got 7 teams, and then the question is, can each of these teams afford to wait? Let's just start with the Raiders, because you know what? They can.
They can.
They've got Derek Carr. They've got the bird in the hand.
Right.
They can wait. Now, the problem is if they're intent on upgrading from Derek Carr, they're going to blow their opportunity to upgrade from Derek Carr if that's one of their objectives this offseason. But if they're willing to give Derek Carr one more year, bird in the hand, two in the bush, try to get Brady. If you don't, well, Derek, we got you for one more year.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. I think the Raiders are one of those teams that could afford to wait. You're right. You know, if they come to the realization that, okay, I mean, yeah, we don't love Derek Carr, but, you know, we still, you know, we'll be okay if he is the guy. You know, yeah, they could sit there and wait a few weeks for Tom Brady. Then, you know, the Chargers, I say the same thing. I agree. I think the Chargers can be a team that can wait. One, they have Tyrod Taylor there. I've had many people tell me that, you know, the organization, there was many people that wanted to bench Phillip Rivers last year for Tyrod Taylor. I don't think they would be too scared to go into a season that way anyways, with the type of offense they want to run. Plus, they have the luxury of maybe thinking about drafting a quarterback too, which adds them a little waiting time as well. Go ahead.
That's the fallback.
Yeah.
Right? That's the fallback for a team that would otherwise be in. Let's say for the Chargers, I think they should trade for Cam Newton.
Yeah.
But if they try to go all in on Tom Brady, I don't like Tyrod Taylor as the fallback because been there, done that. We've seen what he is. We've seen what he isn't.
Right.
And at some point, when in Rome, man, you're the Chargers. You're in Los Angeles now. Tyrod Taylor is not going to move the needle in L.A.
No.
Cam Newton will. Tom Brady will. And maybe that does increase the pressure on them to get a draft pick, maybe even trade up if they have to get a player that will resonate. They need to make moves that will resonate in L.A. And, hey, maybe just the pursuit of Tom Brady is enough to get people excited.
Maybe.
Right?
Right.
Maybe if they can convince people in L.A. they're in the mix for Tom Brady, people will buy tickets before finding out whether or not Tom Brady even ends up with the Chargers. But it's riskier for them because I think their plan B is less than the plan B for the Raiders.
Yeah, I agree with that, too. I mean, yes, I'm not going to say Tyrod Taylor's as good as Derek Carr because he's not. You're exactly right. But, you know, the point being that it wouldn't be like they're like, oh, my gosh, they're done with Tyrod Taylor. And we know they have a good defense. Anthony Lynn wants to run the ball. Tyrod Taylor did bring a team to the playoffs a few years ago. And you're right, with the draft thing, too, that gives them a little more leeway, too. Who is that guy in the draft? To me, when you just talk about the Chargers and you want to talk about, you know, stars and everything like that, Tua is the guy that would make sense that they would make a move for. I mean, of course, Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow are going to excite the fan base, but I just feel like Tua being from Hawaii and out there and somewhat associated with the West Coast would and he's been at Alabama and such a household name that he'd be that next star as far as the draft guys are considered. I feel like the Chargers would flirt with.
And again, the Chargers have not done a great job in their time in L.A. of making decisions aimed at attracting an L.A. fan base, so I don't even know that I have any faith in them there. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The Tennessee Titans, the third team you mentioned, because they've got to make a decision pretty soon on what they're going to do with Ryan Tannehill. And if this new CBA goes through before the start of the new league year, forget about having both a franchise tag and a transition tag. You got one. You got the franchise tag, and that's it. And it may go to Derrick Henry. So Ryan Tannehill ends up being the new quarterback of I don't know who, but not the Titans, while they wait for Tom Brady. And then what do they do there? Re-sign Marcus Mariota? They're a team that can't afford to wait, Chris.
I don't think so either. They can't afford to wait. Plus, I think if Ryan Tannehill gets out on the open market right now, he's going to have teams that are going to be clamoring for him. I do. I think he had a good enough year. And if people go back and dissect what he did in Miami, like we've talked about a few times during the week, that they're going to come away a little bit more pleasantly surprised than they realized with this play there, too, to where, yes, I think there will be demand there. And if they waited too long, an extra 2 or 3 weeks from Brady, they could lose Tannehill and Mariota and all of it all together. And I wouldn't suggest that for them. They went to the NFC Championship game, and other than Derrick Henry, the second biggest reason was Ryan Tannehill, and that's why if I was them, I would stay the course there.
Now, if they would know ahead of time that they could get Brady and they feel like Brady's an upgrade, that's one thing. But if he's going to do this, come see me, and then I'm going to make a decision, I don't think they can afford to wait. Buccaneers. Well, let's go Dolphins. Dolphins were next. I threw them in there. Actually, I threw them at the end. Let's go Buccaneers next.
Yeah.
Because they're another one that needs to have their act together before free agency begins. Are they going to keep Jameis Winston? Are they going to go after Phillip Rivers? Do they have a shot at Brady? Would they go after Ryan Tannehill? What do you do? And I don't think you can wait to see what Tom Brady does because the music may stop and you're looking around saying, Who's our quarterback? Ryan Griffin?
Yeah, I know. But they also might be in an area where they just go, okay, there's so many quarterbacks on the market this year. You know, if we could play this right and kind of keep in contact with the Andy Daltons and the Teddy Bridgewaters and some other guys that are out there that we know are going to be available, they might have at least fail-safe plans to go, okay, we can wait for Brady. Let's let Jameis go test the market, and we'll see that. We'll see what happens there. We like him, but we don't love him. We're not sure. They might be able to wait a little bit. You know, I don't think Tom Brady's going to Tampa either way right now, but, you know, I do think it's a team that has a little leeway maybe to wait it out a little bit of time there for Tom Brady.
And this is another example of what can happen if Tom Brady pulls off this ultimate boss move in free agency. It may be that other teams say to other quarterbacks, we're interested. We just have to see what happens with Tom Brady first. And the agents for those other quarterbacks decide to wait, right? Like, and this is where it's going to be fascinating because you're going to have, let's say, let's use Phillip Rivers as an example. Let's say that the Colts are hammering Phillip Rivers. We have the contract, balls on the tee. We want you. We're not in the Tom Brady sweepstakes. The Buccaneers are. We want you to sign now, or we're going to go sign Teddy Bridgewater. We need to know right now. Under those circumstances, maybe Phillip Rivers doesn't wait to see what happens with the Buccaneers and Tom Brady. That's where it's going to get very interesting.
Yes, right.
How many of these other situations will remain unfilled?
That's right.
And how many of these other quarterbacks are going to be willing to wait because there's going to be those teams on the other side of the Tom Brady market who are saying, screw these teams that are trying to get Tom Brady. We want a quarterback now, and this is the guy we want. And if you don't come here, we're going to go get somebody else.
Yeah, that's where these teams are going to have to be careful because you're going to have to gauge the market in its totality with the players and teams and the need and how many are out there and how you have the quarterbacks that are out on the market, you know, ranked in your pecking order and things like that. Yeah, that's you're right. I mean, we don't know that, and that's what teams are going to have to juggle around, and that is where it's going to be interesting because I'm sure some teams are going to be desperate to get something done quickly. Some are going to want to wait, and then they're going to go, oh, no, plan B's gone now, too. We got to make a decision and just get to plan C right now, too. So that's why it's a fascinating offseason with all these quarterbacks and what's going on.
If you're the Colts, do you – and look, the prospect of Tom Brady choosing the Colts, who knows at this point, especially when you consider that he's got to move his family there. And as Tony Dungy told us when we were kind of trying to figure out some of these potential destinations before the end of the season, the idea of Giselle voluntarily choosing to live in Indianapolis, nothing against Indianapolis. It just doesn't seem like – I mean, and I can't wait to go to Indianapolis next week.
Yeah, we have fun.
Supermodel, Indianapolis, hard to envision her being happy there. But can the Colts say – we're fine with Jacoby Brissett if push comes to shove. We've got him under contract. We've got Brian Hoyer under contract. We'll stick with them, and we will suspend any effort to try to get Phillip Rivers or Teddy Bridgewater or whoever and make our shot at Tom Brady. If we don't get him, we're fine with who we have.
Yeah, I don't know if they can. I think that's dicey for the Colts. I wouldn't feel comfortable going into this offseason with just Jacoby Brissett as my guy. I would not. You know, and I know Brian Hoyer he's a capable backup, but you don't want him to be your starter at this point, not at all. You know, so then, yeah, I'm concerned with what I saw from Jacoby Brissett towards the end of the year. I really am. I think they need to have another guy in there to compete with him, or at the very least, if it starts next year the way it kind of ended off, that you can, you know, pull the trigger there, get him out of the game, and put somebody else in. And I just don't know if I would waste it there. They're a team that's very close. You know, I think you and I both agree they were one of those teams we said, ooh, if they get in the playoffs, they could be dangerous. But they didn't get in the playoffs, and they lost their dangerous edge to me because Jacoby Brissett was less than down the stretch. And that to me is where it's concerning, and I don't think they can, sit there and wait too long.
Isn't it amazing to think that we got into the start of the regular season just on the heels of Andrew Luck retiring in surprising fashion? And it was like, hey, Jacoby Brissett. Hey, look at this. Jacoby Brissett. They're 5-2. Jacoby Brissett. Then by the end of the season, we're like, they got to move on from Jacoby Brissett. Isn't it amazing how quickly our attitudes can change about a player? It's
amazing. I mean, he tweaked his knee, right? And he never was the same when he came back. And to me, it was more of, you know, what scared me is things I saw on film, of course, definitely. And just watching games on TV and seeing Frank Reich's reactions to some of the throws Jacoby Brissett and decisions he was making, to me, they were the biggest telltale signs. You know, I think that's when I looked at games and I just went, oh, man, they don't trust him. And they don't know what the hell he's doing right now. They have no idea. You know, I remember that Houston Texans Thursday night game they played? I mean, they got afraid to throw the ball with Jacoby Brissett because there was people open everywhere, and he was missing them or not throwing to them. I think Frank Reich just said, I don't trust the guy. I'm going to run the ball every play, a little bit like we saw Shanahan do with Garoppolo in the Vikings playoff game. And that, to me, is what's concerning about Jacoby Brissett right now.
All right, last one, the Dolphins. They've got Ryan Fitzpatrick. He said he's coming back. They've got Josh Rosen. They're apparently keeping him. They've got the draft as the ultimate fallback.
Yeah.
I almost feel like the Dolphins could be kind of like the bemused participant in this. Like, we're just hanging around because Tom Brady asked us to make a proposal. You know, you get the RFP from somebody that's looking to do business with someone. Yeah, we don't really expect to win this contract, but what the hell? We'll put in the document. We'll go to the meeting. We'll see what happens. And if Tom Brady all of a sudden says, I want to play for you, then we'll deal with that when it gets to it. But I could see the Dolphins going through the motions with Tom Brady because they can.
Yeah, they got Fitzpatrick. They got Rosen. Like you said, they're in a great spot to get a quarterback regardless, right? So they could at least flirt with it and do their due diligence and kind of wrap their head around it to see if they would really want that to happen. I don't imagine that happening. But again, I do think it's possible. They're a team that certainly could wait out the process and in a position to do that.
All right. You know what? That's the longest PFTOT I think we've ever done. I think we've crystallized an issue that's kind of been floating around out there that we need to be thinking about. If Tom Brady is going to do this, if he's going to bring these teams in one after another, those teams better understand that their chances of moving forward with a quarterback they feel good about could be reduced dramatically if they don't get the brass ring that is Tom Brady. All right, Chris, enjoy your weekend.
Thank you.
We'll see you Monday. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in Indianapolis, 4 hours live on NBCSN. Everybody enjoy your day. We'll see you back on Friday for another edition of PFT Live.
See ya.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.